Welcome to Defence Connect's The Progress Report, the show spotlighting the women shaping Australia's defence and national security.
Welcome to Defence Connect's The Progress Report, the podcast where we explore the stories, careers and experiences of women working across Australia's defence and national security sectors. I'm your host, Tash Taylor, and in each episode I'm sitting down with industry professionals to talk about their journeys, personal growth, mentorship, and what it really takes to build a meaningful career in one of the country's most complex and essential industries. My guests today are three incredible women from the Families of Veterans Guild, and I'm joined by CEO Renee Wilson, Board Director and Interim Deputy Chair Jennifer Collins, and Board Chair Tricia Hobson. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Look, so for those listening, so this is a special podcast because this is the first time I've actually had more than one person as a guest at a time, which is exciting. And this episode is also special because it isn't focused on individual career paths, but rather on the passion driving real change, supporting not only widows, but also the families of current serving Defence members and veterans. So I'd love to just jump in with you guys straight away because there's so many questions I have that I'd love to sort of cover. But the first one being, could you share the story of the War Widows Guild and the role of Jessie Mary Vasey in establishing it as well?
So the War Widows Guild in New South Wales was established in June 1946. So next year we'll be coming up to our 80th anniversary, which is very exciting for the organisation. It started at the end of World War II when Jessie Vasey, who was the spouse of a veteran of both World War I and World War II, realised that there was a lot missing in the system, and then she herself became a war widow towards the end of World War II. And what she was seeing was basically a group of women in Australia being left out and left behind as their loved ones were, or veterans were returning home. There were things, war widows were left almost destitute. They were not able to access war service pensions. These were women who were young, women who, were now out of the workforce again and raising families on their own. So she gathered a group of like-minded women together, and the whole thing, it's actually quite amazing. So it started in Victoria and then almost became national within 12 months, which was the momentum behind it. And the cause she was fighting for. And you zoom out all of these years later and realise that now we have a group of World War II widows who started with nothing, but thanks to the work of Jessie and the ladies at the time, are now outliving the average age of women in Australia by something like 10 years, which is quite amazing. So she was successful in holding governments accountable for their promises to widows, their promises to families, and making sure that they are included in the system of care post-World War I and II.
Beautiful. And that, like you said, the fact that they're outliving, the average lifespan, I guess that just comes from the sheer determination and all the effort that they put into supporting other women, would you say?
I think it's a bit of that. So I think the important things that this organisation does is take care of that emotional and social well-being. It brings peers together. There's the social connection element, and the reduction in isolation, I think, is something really undervalued and underestimated. Yeah. But equally too, putting widows into the veteran system meant that they have access to healthcare. And that's a big thing, particularly as you age. To have access to high quality healthcare, I think, is what is actually the driving factor there. So their social and emotional health is taken care of, and they've got access to healthcare for their physical health as well.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense to me. And when we're talking about the organisation as a whole, I understand that you guys rebranded as of last year, 2024, to the Families of Veterans Guild. Can you walk us through why that change was made, how it broadens the reach of support, and who is now included in that wasn't before?
And then I think I'll come to you, because the board was really, really instrumental in this change. So when I started in the organisation, it was still known as War Widows. The organisation had been on a bit of a journey and identified a critical gap in our system and in the sector. And that gap was that families of veterans generally, regardless of what happened to their veteran, are kind of in this grey area in our system. And the model of care is very old. So to have any form of access to support, you have to be bereaved, and that is from government and from the community sector. And this organisation wanted to reach forward and really take a leadership role, as it did in 1946, to start filling that gap. But the board was instrumental all the way through, and I think it's probably worth drawing Tricia and Jennifer in at this point to talk about what it was like from that perspective.
So, as a board, we've been on a journey. I've been on the board for 6 years and chair for 3, and Jennifer a year longer, I think, than I have. And we've been fortunate to have a very good group on the board, and we all recognised this gap that Renee was talking about. We also recognised that our war widows are absolutely dear and absolutely core and fundamental to who we are, but we also realised we had the ability to help more than just that group, and we also had a need to try to provide our services and to help as wide a group in this sector as we could. There were also younger widows who had different identifiers and different drivers and different needs. And so we felt that it was important. We looked at our constitution. We realised that if we were going to thrive into the future, be able to help a larger group of people, that we needed to change our constitution to start with so that we could broaden who it was we were allowed to actually help. And then we needed to look at how do we it's more than brand. I don't like to use this brand. How do we identify? How do we go out and how do we into society, to the government, to everybody? How do we best from a name perspective identify ourselves so that people identify with us and know what it is we really stand for and who it is we're actually trying to help? And that's why we looked at rebranding and associating with the name Families of Veterans Guild. And that was a journey that we had to go on because we didn't want at any point for our war widows to feel that we were moving away from them, because we 100% were not and never will. But we had to look forward at the same time. And Jennifer, you might want to expand on that.
Just reiterating what Renee and Trish said. The other issue that was a gap was the kids, the families. When we talk about families, we also talk about children. And Renee and I both worked in the same Department of Veterans Affairs for a number of years, and children were never considered as part of the Veteran Entitlement Act, other than some small lump sums if the partner died. But then what happened to them from there was, support for mental health support and the support that needs to go to families just wasn't existing. So we needed to make sure that they were also included in that whatever entity we were going to look at in the future. Yeah. And the same as carers. Carers have been a big thing. Renee and I have been on this journey about trying to get carers recognised, because while the veteran's alive, it's the woman, that's the wife or the partner that's doing all the caring. And it's after they die, they may become a war widow, they may not, but they're also a group who don't fit into the ex-service community, but are a vital part in the health and well-being of the veteran.
I can imagine how hard it is for the families as well, especially the kids going through, even just having a family member, so who's in the service, going away for periods of time, and women most of the time having to, take on all these roles of him, the mum and the dad, trying to get everything done, balancing work life, family life. Do you know off the top of your head how many sort of families that you guys have been supporting throughout this? Or
So a couple of points on that. The kids are a really interesting one. So, and it's interesting because there is so many more gaps in the system for them, and no one is advocating for them. So the key part of what we do is advocacy back into government around system gaps. And this is a growing area. We're seeing increased psychological and psychosocial needs in young kids. So kids under the age of 5, under the age of 12, and they're not supported anywhere in the system. They fall through gaps left, right and centre, which just increases the burden and stress on the households when we've got services out there saying we support children, and then you get, actually, no, sorry, they're young. Well, what do I do now? Sorry, can't help. It's not good enough. And there are clear linkages to service. And so it's a really emerging area. And I think part of the best work we can do there is around our advocacy and closing some of those system gaps for those children. To your point around the numbers of families, it's averaged over the last sort of 5 years that I've been in the organisation around about 2,000.
Wow, that's a big number.
It's a big number, and 90% are war widows.
Yeah.
They're the ones that really are the ones that still remain the core of what we do, and we're starting to expand into this other space.
We want that number to be much bigger.
We do.
And we're hoping, it's podcasts like this that can help us get the message out that we're here for so many more than we already try to serve.
No one counts the number of children.
No.
Children are not considered in the war widows. You can get a number, you can get a veteran number. But if you ask the government how many children, they don't know.
They don't know.
That's crazy.
Well, if you ask the government how many veteran families are there, we still don't know. So it's only been since the last census that we even know how many veterans there are in Australia. So 581,000 veterans. And then you can run some, maths that I'm not very good at, but other people are.
AI is.
AI.
Yeah.
AI is where you can basically then look at, okay, so if that veteran's living in a household, how many households in Australia contain a veteran? How many people on average in those households? So we can get an estimate of families. And the baseline estimate is around 737,000.
Wow.
And of that, you've only got, I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head. It's something like only 10 or 20% of those are currently serviced by the veteran system.
That's crazy.
Isn't it?
So this is like the huge majority here are not getting the support.
No.
Wow. And this is why I think doing things like this is so important, to get that message out there.
Yeah.
To help those families. Because I'm sure there's probably a lot of, individual widows or families that actually don't realise there is this type of support out there.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's a bit the same across the entire system. And importantly, it's important to note, not everyone's going to need the support, which is why, you're not going to have direct service delivery to 700,000 people. But what you can do is make the system better for 700,000 people. So when they do need to reach forward, there's something there. And then there's the element of our direct service delivery as well, which supports that social and emotional well-being. So, that's there and people will come in and out of that. But, that's why the advocacy part of what we do is so important as well.
Yeah. Difficult thing is, as we said before, children don't have an entitlement. They have one entitlement, maybe a gold card until they're 21, and a lump sum in lieu of death. But because we don't count, we don't know how many there are. No. And I think that that's a gap in the system. And it should be a gap in the system government looks at from a policy point of view and from a program and service delivery point of view.
Even just from a cost-benefit point of view, right? If you're intervening early when people are children, you're reducing the health burden later on, aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. But see, what Defence does, looks after this family in the sense of while they're in Defence, but once they're left, they're on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a family who's had a partner who's did multiple deployments, moved multiple times across the country, and then decides to discharge, once they discharge, that's the end of the responsibility from Defence. And unless someone like our organisation picks them up, they fall through the crack.
Which is just awful. And that has ramifications, not just for the veteran, but then for everyone else in their immediate circle.
Right.
Extended circles, really.
Yeah. And I think the education system finds it difficult too, because you might only have one or two children in the school that has a Defence family connection.
Yeah.
So if you've got 1,000 kids in the school and there's only two, they're not seen as different or not, probably don't even understand that the family has been in Defence and what resources could be put in place to assist these families.
Yeah, I think That is a huge gap. I honestly gobsmacked, to be honest, about these numbers. I had no idea. I think a lot of people I think listening wouldn't have a clue that it was the lack of support there.
And most people are, and we find this, there's an assumption because there's a Department of Veterans Affairs, an assumption that it's all just taken care of. And I think part of what's important with things and discussions like this is shining a light on not everything is taken care of. It is a patchwork, and it's probably not a very good patchwork of support, particularly for families. It's probably a really poor patchwork of support.
Well, then the Department of Veterans Affairs or Defence doesn't have a framework. So in their framework is just the veteran or the serving member. It's not that broader family connection, which I would have thought may have come out of the work with the Veterans Family Advocate that they appointed 5 years ago. I would have expected that framework would have been developed. It doesn't mean the Department of Veterans Affairs have to provide all the services, but they should have mapped that complete cohort and put a framework in place.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'd love to ask about something specific, which is the Rise Together initiative, which was announced at Parliament House on March 3rd. Could you tell us a little bit more about the program and what it aims to achieve for Defence and veteran partners?
Yeah, sure. I will. I'll draw Tricia into this because Tricia was part of the process all the way through with this one, and I know it's a topic Tricia's really passionate about as well. So, Rise Together initiative aims to provide leadership and career confidence to veteran partners and spouses, and the majority of them at this stage are women. And we know that women have various barriers and challenges in place anyway when it comes to their career development, and then Defence just adds a little bit more to that. And the data was telling us that they're more likely to be underemployed or unemployed. They struggle to maintain any form of career path because of all the interruptions, which has massive implications. You think about the longevity of super and all of that sort of stuff. If you don't have actually a stable career path, then your super is nowhere near where it should be. So really tangible implications as well as the intangible. And so it actually started with a private donation of a widow who said, I want to help other spouses keep their careers. And so we found a program that enabled that career confidence and leadership development, and we, for 2 years, sent 2 people on that. And then thanks to a 12-month grant from government, we were able to expand that to 10. And we had a session in Parliament House. Tricia, do you want to?
Yeah, Katie Gallagher, Minister for Women's Affairs and many other things, was terrific. We went to Parliament House and we brought a group of women together. Some had been through, 1 or 2 had been through the program, I think, and a number of other interested women. And we sat around and she spent about half an hour with us, maybe a little bit longer, just sort of hearing stories, listening to women's experience on what it's like being a woman who has to take time out, has to move around, and trying to get in and out of career, and how being a defence wife, mother, trying to have the career as well, how that impacts. And she was terrific, really listened, and her office has been incredibly connected with us and through Renee, so we're very grateful for that. Renee talked about the statistics, the superannuation, for example, and I think it's a very well-known statistic now that the fastest growing group of people who are homeless in Australia are women over 55, and there are many elements to that. One is obviously trying to get back into workforce, divorce, lack of access or lack of ability to collect super along the way that gives them enough to actually be able to support themselves and potentially their children as they get older. And so there's all these reasons as to why this initiative, I think, is such a terrific one for us to be involved in. And on a personal level, I being someone who's been in the law and a director and had a fairly large career through my life, it's hard enough for women frankly, as it is often from a career perspective. There are many hurdles and obstacles to achieving your dreams and goals from a career perspective. Some of them great because they're your children and, you want that, but if that's what you want. But for these women in particular, it's particularly hard. And so being able to assist them with some skills, some expertise, some support to help, I think is, terrific. And we're very proud of this initiative.
I can only imagine, for women in general, especially when you're having kids, things like that, jumping back into the workforce can be hard in itself. You add that extra step of you're continually moving around, moving your whole family, and it won't just be up the road. A lot of the time women are moving, interstate, changing your whole life repeatedly, and then to have no support after in finding a job. I didn't realize that the majority of, the highest percentage of homeless population is,
fastest growing.
That's insane. I had no idea.
Yeah. And it's what's really interesting, and we're seeing it more and more. These women who, have a veteran in their family are highly educated, very intelligent, and more are actually choosing some form of legal path because they see it as something that is something that they can use. They get a skill set, they can use it, they can travel with it, they can do all of that sort of stuff. But being, and I don't know, I've this much time in the legal industry, Tricia, incredible amounts of time in the legal industry, but it's still, from what I see on the outside, a very heavily male-dominated environment. And so when you are a woman trying to make it, and you're also then moving around different areas and you're not getting the network and the longevity in the area that you're in, I can't even imagine. You've got that, then you've got the fact that you're a woman.
It is, and it's improved a lot. I've been in the law for over 30 years, and privileged and fortunate enough to have held some very senior positions, and very much focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and with a particular, because genders, my own experience is in what you've got to go through from a woman's perspective in a very male-dominated field. And it takes one thing in particular is it takes a lot of confidence and belief in yourself to be able to navigate that. And if you've had this experience of moving around and stop-starting, I can imagine the impact it has on your ability to have the confidence that's needed to navigate it, to achieve all the things that you want to achieve is tough.
And that's why we were really deliberate with the program we picked to support these women, because it's all about building that. It's about, it spends a lot of time with introspection. It spends a lot of time going through different frameworks, different types of things that you experience in the workforce, but it is all about building that core element of you that allows you to engage in no matter what environment you're in. And one of the ladies who did it a couple of years ago, I saw her at a defence transition seminar, and she came up to me and she said, I'm not currently employed and I feel bad, but here's what that program gave me. It gave her the confidence to say, you know what, this workplace is not for me. And she removed herself from the workplace because her priority was taking care of her mother right now. And so she's chosen that. And then now she'll have the confidence to come back in when she's ready. And I was like, that is a massive gift to be able to say, you know what? No, I actually just need space for myself right now. That is huge.
Absolutely. It's massive because, throughout this podcast, I'm speaking to women from all areas of the industry. I have some women who are space engineers, and I've had women who work in HR for, in the maritime space, all these sort of different areas. And one theme pretty much every woman talks about is having that imposter syndrome and having the lack of confidence. And also so many women within the sort of defense related industries, things like that. It is primarily male dominated space. And I think especially for women like we're talking about, they've had to move around and all these sort of things, of course that's going to affect your confidence. And to have an incredible opportunity like what you guys are doing just to give women that confidence again, is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really incredible. And what was special about this year was being able to have a cohort of 12 people, which meant that we got a special delivery of the program. Those women were not in with the rest of the group, and there's nothing wrong with that. A number of others have been through that, and that's fine. But the 12 women that went through together. They did all of this vulnerability work together, and they bonded almost immediately. So it's had this other effect of creating that social connection and peer support amongst different types of lived experiences. So we had widows, we had current serving spouses, former serving spouses, all different types of ages, all different types of educational backgrounds. And even the facilitators of the program said they'd never seen a group bond so quickly and so well, and they've maintained that. And we're watching that, because that for me is the key differentiator, and why continuing to fund that at that level is really important, because it's producing all of these other benefits we didn't expect.
So we're very grateful to the government. We want to continue to be grateful to
right,
them while
yes.
they continue to focus more and give us more money.
That's it.
The Governor General has been very generous. She has said that she will host an event for us at Admiralty House for these women to celebrate.
That's great.
They're going through the program, because she's a great supporter of initiatives like this. So get that in there.
Yeah, fabulous. And look, so each of you bring your own unique perspective and reasons for being so passionate about supporting defence and veteran families. And I'd love to explore a little bit further with each of you. I'd love to start with you, Renee. So just to touch on your impressive career firstly. So you've worked in the Attorney General's department, held positions with the New South Wales Crown Solicitor's Office, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defence, not to mention serving on the boards of the Australian International Military Games, and a member for so many more incredible organisations. I physically couldn't put them all in because I'd be rattling it off for half an hour. Super, super incredible. But for you, so the new strategic direction for Families of Veterans Guild is something deeply personal for you, given your lived experience. So for you, your husband, Gary, is an Afghanistan war veteran who was wounded in 2010. Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your journey and story?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, my husband was wounded during the Afghanistan war in 2010. He was in a helicopter accident that sadly claimed the lives of 3 Australian commandos and wounded 7 others. It was a whirlwind. At the time, what that did, and with time, I saw more and more of it, because when you're in it, you just kind of go with all the different stuff you've got to go with. But what I was seeing through that was how the veteran system wasn't set up to support needs of what I would call then contemporary veterans. You know, here we have this group of 7 Australian commandos who have come back with catastrophic injuries, big injuries that are just, we don't even know what to do with this. And both defence and DV8, we don't know what to do with this. When we're talking about, significant traumatic brain injuries for at least 2, we're talking about mild traumatic brain injuries for the other, I can't do my math that quickly, 4. No, 5.
5.
5. There we go. So very, very complex, complicated situations. And you're talking about, injuries, of the physical injuries to multiple parts of bodies. And we're not even going anywhere near the mental injuries. So I saw very quickly how that the system wasn't set up to support any of that. From, we need to move we're in a defence house. We're in a 2-story house. He can't come home to that. Defence, what do I do? Defence goes, I don't know.
So the support wasn't available to you guys.
It was a nightmare. It was a catastrophic nightmare everywhere. And so seeing all of that, I was at the time working at the Crown Solicitor's Office, and I was working in inquests, and part of our role was to look at things holistically and go, what could change to make this better, to make sure it never happened again. So I already kind of had that mindset. And then I can't remember how. I think it was through Jennifer. I got invited to speak at a DVA forum, and I was like, okay, if you want to know what can change, I'll tell you what can change. And so, off we went, and I ended up.
I'm sure that was one hell of a speech.
Yeah. Because you were quite young when this happened.
Yeah.
23, was it? I was reading.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me
23.
that you've managed, your whole life has just been turned upside down.
Yeah. So I started off with this, I wanted to fix it for the veterans and hadn't really even considered families. And I think the reason I hadn't considered families is because at that time he was my priority, everything. Like we had to get him home. We had to get him whatever he needed. Experiences across the system were really poor. Spoke to someone from DVA at the time. He said, we're going to be with you for the rest of your life. And I won't repeat what I said because I was just, I couldn't even go there.
Yeah.
Given the experience we had. So I went to DVA to try and make it better for veterans. And then in 2017, my husband went to Invictus in Toronto, and I went with him for the first time. And for the first time, I felt seen as a family member. I realised I wasn't actually by myself, and I saw I realised how much we were all doing behind the scenes and how under-supported it was across the system. And we got exposure to what was happening in the US and the UK and Canada. And I just sat back and I was like, my God. And I went back to DVA because that's where I was working. I sent emails to everyone. I'm like, we've got to do this stuff. And it was just falling on deaf ears. So it was like this moment of realization. It also triggered this journey of healing for myself.
Yeah.
And now it's that same mindset wanting to fix it for the veterans. It's now really personal.
I honestly can't imagine going through what you went through. I think it takes a lot of strength to actually be able to get through that. But then not only do that, you've gone and changed everything. You're trying so hard to change everything for the better of so many people going through the same situations.
It has to make, you have to, when you're going through something like that, you sit in there wondering why is this happening to you? Why? And then I think part of the healing is to move into, well, it has to be for some form of purpose. So let's push it to some form of purpose. Let's use it for good so that we don't sit in the trauma of it anymore.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the sort of shared experiences is obviously something that's made your passion so strong for those other families and widows and other women who've had injured spouses going through it. You have that extra level of, relatability, I suppose.
And it's just this intrinsic, we get each other without having to say anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Look, I would love to cover questions for everyone. So I'm going to quickly jump across to you, Jennifer. So I understand that you've had an incredible career, currently sitting as the board director in an interim deputy chair for Families of Veterans Guild. You previously were the Deputy Commissioner at the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Commission and the Department of Veterans Affairs for New South Wales and ACT since 2004 until retirement in 2017. So you have also, all of you have had incredible careers that just blow me away. I would love to know what first sparked your passion for supporting veterans and families.
Well, I think most families in Australia, 1 in 20 have a veteran somewhere in their family.
Yeah.
But I trained as a registered nurse at Concord Repatriation Hospital, which in the 80s, which was actually a veterans hospital. It was specifically set up by the federal government. It was run by the federal government for veterans. And from there, in 2004, as you said, I then took up a position as the Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So a long history in that veteran and family space. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
And I met some amazing people like Renee. My first conversation with Renee was a complaint.
A complaint? What was the complaint?
I made a complaint.
No, I'd heard that through my network that there was a couple who were receiving really poor service from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So I invited them in, and of course Renee told me exactly what was wrong. I had been attempting to change what was going on in the Department of Veterans Affairs because they were used to looking after older veterans. They understood them, they had a system set up for them, Now you've got a young guy, not so much Gary, but other veterans, where the department couldn't understand you actually need more than one artificial leg. You have an artificial leg for walking, you need an artificial leg to go surfing, you need an artificial leg to go skiing. They didn't get it, they didn't understand. One leg, one veteran. So after meeting Renee, we had a senior executive meeting, and I said to the secretary at the time, I think you need to invite Renee and Gary to the forum, and the executive need to listen to their story. Well, they were just blown away. They couldn't believe the poor level of service they got from DBA. I remember, I think it was morning tea, the secretary came up and said, hire her tomorrow, will you? And that's
I
how
love that.
she came in. And he was a good secretary that was focused very much, understood older veterans, but was willing to learn about the younger veterans. So hence that's, where we started many years ago.
How long ago was that, Neil?
What was that? That would have been 2013.
Yes, that's about right, 2013.
I love that it started with a complaint.
It did.
I think it's a brilliant story starter. I think that's great.
I hope that improved since then, though, Renee.
Like a Dutch, for the fact it has.
I think so. Yes.
Oh, you mean DVA?
Yeah.
I meant your relationship.
No.
Yes, it has. And yes, some things have changed. So when I started at DVA, it was the section I went into was 10 people trying to move an entire department into the 21st century. And now I would say they have a culture of change in DVA.
Yeah.
It's not quite translating where it needs to be, but it's the entire culture now. It's quite incredible. Yeah.
Yep. So now I understand, I've been doing a little bit of research. I understand, Jennifer, that you played a really key role in driving major reforms in service delivery for widows and their families in the Middle East area. So could you share a little bit more about those reforms, what they involved and the impact that they actually had?
Okay, well, again, as we said earlier, the DBA was not geared to this younger cohort at all, no idea. And the first two deaths out of Afghanistan were two young women. One was had given birth the day before her husband was killed in Afghanistan.
Oh, my God.
The other widow was pregnant. She was about 6 months. She was raising her husband's children from a previous marriage. So they were two under the age of 25. Defence looks after these widows until about 4 weeks post the funeral. And you're remembering that the funerals out of Afghanistan, because the Prime Minister at the time, were very public, very huge ramp ceremonies. It was the first time in Australian history that a Prime Minister attended every one of those funerals. And there's good and bad in it. So these women were under the age of 25, dealing with politicians, media. The media were all over them, didn't understand these women were in grief, and at the same time trying to manage their own family. So in some conversations with people from Defence and one of those particular widows, which I went to meet, it was obvious to me that we needed major reform in the department to manage these women. They couldn't just go through this normal funnel into the department. And when you have a death like they were having in Afghanistan so publicly, they were just lost. And I think at one stage I counted they needed to make a contact with 29 departments post-death. You know, people like DBA, Defence, Housing, your bank, changing your bank account, insurance, Centrelink, it just goes on and on. So these women just were in grief and just a huge hill in front of them. And both those two widows were also the widows that was at this time of the funeral received letters from the guy that was in the Link Cafe. They received letters. They were given to them at the service. So this is in the middle of grief. They get these letters from his wife saying their husbands were killers. So that was on top of what they're already dealing with.
Oh, my God.
So after talking to one of these widows, it seemed to me that what they needed at most was a single point of contact. They didn't need to deal with all these departments. We could do that. That's what we're expert at. So we put in place what was called service coordination. So they only had to deal with one person in the department, and that person was their link in with the other departments, be it Centrelink or tax or wherever it might be. after each death, I would go and meet the widow with the service coordinator. Defence would they'd have a bereavement team, and they'd formally hand over the family to DVA, so there was no gaps in that support. And then usually they would stay with a single point of contact for as many years as they require it. So it was critical that those positions were in place. And I know that widows really benefit from that support. And they were heartbreaking to go and visit these families. It's just unbelievable what they were expected to negotiate on their own.
Mm.
And some of them were from blended families. Some had living in a city with no family support, living in defence housing. One of those widows was told she had 6 weeks to get out of the house post her husband's death. So a lot of advocacy had to go on behind the scenes with Defence to ensure that these people didn't fall through the cracks, hence the creation of what was called service coordination.
It's just amazing to me that there are people like you changing this, because I'm 26. I could not imagine having a whole family to support. You've just lost your partner. You're getting kicked out of your house. You're being harassed by the media. You're getting sent awful messages from that's just insane to me. And then having to, like you said, 29 different departments that you're expected to then reach out to in your time of grief. So you're not even getting a chance to try and grieve.
Well, no. And one of the difficult things was, even though they were killed overseas, it had to be the coroner in Australia that had to say what the cause of death was, and trying to get a death certificate out of the coroner so this family could, move on, close bank accounts, reopen bank accounts, and so on, was really, really difficult. I remember I had to fly to Perth because we had a widow over there. The coroner had been sitting with him for 2 years, and this widow couldn't move on at all. 2 years? So when I met with the coroner, she said, I could have given it to you within a week. Why didn't someone tell me? Because the coroner on the form didn't say this person died in service with the Australian Defence Force.
That's a terrible story.
Oh, terrible.
So horrible. Oh, my God.
Well, that was the system, but that was, 2000 and what was the first death? 2009. Yeah, so it's been, that was a long time ago. I'm not sure the service coordination role has continued.
Yeah.
I think what they do is they manage it, and then after 2 years you're off the books.
Okay.
Which is a bit disappointing because, as you know, through the journey of grief and families, there are times when they'll need more support than at other times. But yeah.
Okay.
Which is why we've tried to dovetail and are building a social work service. So recognising that, Defence will look after you for 4 weeks and shut the book, and DVA might look after you for 2 years and shut the book. It doesn't take the need away, which is why we're focused on sort of building that out and making sure we were very deliberate in making sure that they were appropriately skilled people doing this work, so that we can really limit any potential harm. We don't want to do extra harm, and we want to be able to provide that support because things will change and people will need support, and then they won't be able to re-engage with DVA.
Yeah, and it's the same as the model I developed around this wounded injured. They were going through exactly the same thing. If they're in defence, there's a support system, and once they were discharged, you're on your own again.
I was actually just about to ask you about that. So you sort of pivoted perfectly, because I was going to ask, I understand that you designed and implemented a client support program specifically focused on seriously ill and injured veterans. So can you tell us a little bit more about
very
that?
similar to the service coordination for widows. They had a single point of contact with the department. They had one person they would ring, and that person was responsible for managing that process, particularly for the wounded and injured, because there's a claims process that goes on behind. They put a claim in. I read somewhere the other day, someone's waiting 5 years for the results. But so the claim would come in before the person could actually receive any support in the sense of emotional support, but also any physical or healthcare support. Yeah. So there needed to be some changes in legislation that allowed that to happen. So very similar model. I told you the story about, needing different legs, up until that point. They just said one veteran, one leg,
That's just crazy to me because you're right. Like if you want to go run around an oval, it's completely different.
leg. That's
Yeah.
right. It's not an old wooden leg like our old veterans had, but so things like that. But also, I think the injuries are much more catastrophic than they've been in the past. The old veterans might have got gassed or and sent home or had a couple of injuries, but these guys have had big injuries, and some of them have gone on to amazing things. The young veteran that lost his leg and arm in Sydney Harbour from the bull shark, he's got his life together so well, and now is a big shark expert in America. Runs his own podcast, his own TV show,
And he's like a fitness influencer.
Oh, amazing
Oh my
things he's fallen
God.
onto. So the right support at the right time can give people another opportunity to go on and do other things. More like Renee's husband, Gary, catastrophic injuries. How he survived, I don't know. No one does. But he's gone on to, not letting it, get him twice. Really focused on making sure that his family's supported and, moving on in his career. So, and that's what you want. You don't want what used to happen is, my uncle had World War II, came back with bad PTSD, used to go down the paddock and stay there for days, but there was no support for them at all. Where these days, we put the right support in at the right time, in the right way, they can go on to have another career. And that's what you want to do. Exactly the same as the widows. You want them to have a career. And I think what the Rise Up is doing is actually doing that very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's just it's about the timing as well. Like get in there early to offer these big support, because at the end of the day, if you're not getting it early enough, then awful things like PTSD is going to ruin people's lives, and like even down to the small things. Like it's just all encompassing that people get the support at the right time,
In the right way.
in the right way.
Because that's important too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so both those two models were very much focused on the individual rather than the masses. And that's certainly what we do, Renee and her team do through advocacy.
Yeah.
If an issue comes to, we had a recent example of a young widow with a young person who couldn't go to school and needed to have some mental health intervention. Department didn't want to know about it. Well, she's not at school. She shouldn't be getting any services at all. She shouldn't be even having a gold card. But on Renee's advocacy through the minister's office, they actually recognised, well, hang on a minute, if she can't go to school because her mental health is so bad, affected by her father's suicide, then maybe there is another way we could support this individual. And that's what the advocacy is, where, 4 or 5 years ago, that wasn't happening. These children were just falling through the cracks and parents didn't know where to go. So, so we do a lot Renee and her team do a lot of advocacy.
All of you just, oh my God, I keep saying it, but you just wow me, honestly. The amount of changes that you're all making to so many people's lives are just beautiful, honestly. So I'm going to jump over to Tricia now. So once again, Tricia, you have had an incredible career when I was reading about it. So you sit on the board for the Families of Veterans Guild, but you're also a partner of the law firm DLA Piper, working within the insurance sector for over 25 years, including becoming the first female global chair at Norton Rose Fulbright and noted in the Asia Pacific Legal 500 Hall of Fame for insurance. So that's just in itself is a big wow. Again, all of you, awesome careers. I'm very inspired. So I would like to hear from you as well about you're such a successful lawyer in the insurance sector. So how did you end up, what sparked the passion for supporting veterans and families?
A number of things. I think, first of all, I grew up with parents who were both educators. They were government school teachers. So modest sort of upbringing, but a lot of emphasis on service, community, giving back, values. Having a career in the law is very satisfying for a number of reasons. And we're very privileged because we earn a reasonable amount of money and we get to live nice lives. But for me, when I came out of doing the board work, so I was global chairman role and on the global board for 6 or 7 years, I wanted to take on something that was purposeful and meaningful and to give back to community as part of what I was doing, because you just move into that phase in your life. And I got approached about this this board, and there were two things that really resonated with me. One, I loved the story of it being founded by a woman, for women, by women, because part of my journey, as I've said already, is around, from a gender perspective, it can be tough, and there's a journey that you go through. So women supporting women is incredibly important. It's always been important for me. And secondly, my mother, her father went off to war, World War II, and when he came back, he no doubt, there was probably a lot of PTSD and mental health issues, but of course back then it wasn't diagnosed. He left my mother and her mother, and so my mother was the eldest of three. She had to leave school and go and get a number of jobs to help her mother because they didn't have any support. And I kind of think about the difference it would have made to my mother's life and to my grandmother's life if they'd had more of a support network. And so that was also important with our journey to becoming families of veterans, because, of course, my grandmother wasn't a widow, but she was for all intent and purposes. And so that was something which gave me a real personal connection, which is something I wanted in taking it on. So there were those two, and then of course what I wanted to bring was not just my personal connection, but I also wanted to make sure that the skills and expertise that I'd developed through my career could be put to good use. And one thing I'm very passionate about, kind of like some people might think, how can you be passionate about this? But good governance to me is the cornerstone of the strength for an organisation. And if you do not have good governance, you cannot be the best organisation that you can be. And so I believed that if I could bring some of my governance and risk and that sort of expertise to the board and try to make sure that it had that bedrock foundation in order to then go forward and do the good work, then that could be a gift that I could potentially give to this organisation. And that's not a solo gig by any means. You've got to have great people with you on the journey to achieve that. Like these two wonderful women here. And so that's been a real big focus. So hopefully I'm been doing some of that.
She's been doing very well.
100%.
Completely changed the whole focus of the organisation. As I said yesterday, her leadership, strong governance, strategic direction, but also at the heart of any decisions we make at the board, Tricia's very much focused on what's the benefit for the member.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good
and
way to sum that up.
Like being out there, delivering that work, it just brings this level. Tricia talked about the importance of governance. It brings a level of integrity to the organisation where we can hand on heart say, yes, we do what we say we do because we know we do, because we have all of this in place.
Yeah. What I love is it's just so evident that you guys just have such a beautiful connection to each other. It's just so lovely to see the friendship you all have and the support, and it's just overwhelmingly beautiful, I must say.
Well, that's nice to hear, and that you feel that. We had our AGM yesterday, and we got some lovely feedback from some members about how they felt the leadership team. They could feel it wasn't just well run, but they could feel the warmth coming through in the AGM, which I think we all take as a great compliment. We have our we have our constructive disagreements and we have our challenges, but they're always putting the organisation and the members at the heart. And we don't really have disagreements. We have really good, vibrant discussions.
We push each other,
and we push each other to get the best outcome.
Yeah.
So
and that, like, I've never worked in a workplace which is, currently 100% women on the board and 99% women in the team, where it is actually pushing each other or to think about things differently or to bring different perspectives. And it's such a diversity of skills and experiences from the board all the way through to delivery that I think produces this, but it does take vulnerability.
Yeah.
It takes confidence. And it's the culture set from the top, right?
Renee's built a very strong team too. Very strong team, very well respected by the staff.
Yeah.
So she gets the best out of them, and they very much respect her. And all of that has impacted on, where we've got to in our journey, thanks to Renee and Trish.
And when it comes to
All of us.
I love that. Beautiful. When it comes to the team, so Trish, you wrote a beautiful article on the importance of diversity. And I would love to know, how has working alongside women of all ages on the board shaped your perspective on leadership and influenced the way you approach your role?
I like huge. I actually mentioned this at the AGM yesterday. So in the business world, the boards that I sit on, very different because everyone comes from a business background.
Yeah.
Okay. And there can be diversity amongst that as well, but that is it. There's I guess a want of diversity in that respect, because what I get and what challenges me and what makes me think differently is that our members of the board, some of our older ladies, they don't come from a business background. They come from all sorts of different backgrounds, but generally not from this background. And they're wonderful because they will ask different questions. They're not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to show that they might not have a business background, and they'll ask a question that comes from a different angle, one that I would not have thought about, and it forces me to stop as chair. I very much try to make sure we're all collectively, our views are all gathered in every decision we make. And it makes me really stop sometimes and think, okay, I've got to shift a different gear here in order to kind of think a bit more laterally about where we need to go. So there's that element of it. And there's just the connection. They bring this warmth and connection from the wider membership into the boardroom. And that's a very hard thing for boards, is to feel connected enough to their organisation to know that the decisions they're making are the best ones for their organisation. No matter whether you're on the board of Qantas or you're in the board of Family and Veterans Guild, having those members and the warmth that these older ladies bring and connection into that helps us as a board, I think, function better because we are better connected to the organisation.
And you have a better understanding, I suppose, from everyone's points of view.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And Tricia's introduced bringing 2 members to the board every couple of months. So the general from the membership, they get an hour. They can ask any questions. They can put our views forward. And I think that's been a really positive initiative. And the feedback from the first session was extremely positive. And yes, they may come and have a different view on us, but as Trish said, it allows us to really make an informed decision about some of the strategic directions and issues. So,
yeah. And look, before we run out of time, I did want to ask you as well. So given that, so you obviously have worked in a male-dominated industry, I would love to know what advice you can give women out there in terms of facing issues like imposter syndrome, things like that, because you've done it, you've been through it, you've been so successful in it. What can you share with the lovely listeners?
That's a big question. I don't look to answer. It's so I'm also about to, and I'm doing a little bit of coaching for kind of senior women who are trying to navigate into the next level at the moment. I think that what I've learned is one of the most important things is to be your authentic self, no matter where you are. That can be hard, but in my view, it has to be your North Star.
Yeah.
And that you've got to, because when you're your authentic self, you're bringing your values, your personal core elements into your decision making. And sometimes I think, so that helps with imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is a difficult thing, because I think everyone suffers from it a bit. Even men suffer from it too, but I think women more perhaps than men often. But that is that I think just comes from a confidence, inner confidence thing. And with women, it's because it's that classic, they'll think that they have to tick all 10 boxes for a job description. Men only think 2. I try to teach women to think, go the middle ground, go 5, just kind of try to think differently. But going back to the authentic self, you'll come up against difficult decisions in your career. Everyone does at every stage. And the only way, I think, to truly navigate those in a way that you can live with well and is to be authentic, true to your values. And sometimes it means you actually make decisions that are can have some consequences you'd rather not have. But at the end of the day, you live better with yourself and you move on. And often it means it might push you to a slightly different path, but that's actually okay because that path will take you somewhere where you're meant to be. So I think that is, and look, along the way, you've got to navigate politics and various things. And I think sometimes women are more challenged by that than others. But the authenticity North Star for me is probably the key piece of advice that I would give most women trying to navigate their way through it.
I love thinking about that as a North Star. I think it's lovely, very lovely. Now, look, before we wrap up, at the end of every episode, we do a little section called Words on the Board. And I just ask for one little piece of advice.
Yeah, tell us that.
I don't need to. Honestly, the best ones we've had is when I forget to tell everyone about this and spur of the moment. Just one small piece of advice.
Jeff and I are looking terrified right
I
now.
know.
We've got no idea.
You've already done your advice, though.
Well, you
Authenticity, I just
to be
did
honest,
it.
I was going to say, you sort of just covered this completely.
Over to the two of you.
So over to you two. Just to women or anyone really listening to the podcast, one piece of advice that you have for career journeys or sort of whatever you'd like to cover off that we could leave with the listeners.
I'll reflect. I don't know if it's going to be one piece of advice, but I love authenticity. And for me, the big learning in taking on this job, because I'd come from, mid-level public sector management, 5 minutes at the Crown Solicitor's office. So it was a huge leap. And I'm still learning. So I'm going to give the advice, but I'm going to preface it on, I'm still trying to figure this out for myself. Learn to be okay when you don't get it right and move forward. Don't stew on it. Pull out the lesson and move forward.
I think that's perfect because I'm one of those people that stews on everything. So I completely understand. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I was going to say is through my life, I've had a range of mentors.
Yeah.
And you've got to recognise when you've outgrown your mentor.
Oh, that's a good
Um,
Yeah.
No one has said that before. Okay.
because there will be times when they no longer meet your needs. So it's important that you recognise when you've outgrown your mentor.
Yeah.
And most people would have many mentors throughout their careers. But that's my advice.
Yeah.
Know when your time's up.
Fantastic. That's a great piece of advice.
Don't do the slow fade away.
Yes. Something like that.
So look, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Progress Report. So thank you so much, ladies. All of you.
Thank you.
All your insights have just been amazing, incredible. Actually, one thing I should probably ask is, for people to support this organisation, what's the best way that we can do so?
Best way we can do so is
Donate.
just head on to the website.
Yep.
There is a donate button, familiesofveteransguild.org.au. Or contact us if you're keen to support our Rise Together initiative, ceo@fov.org.au.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure that we share this on our LinkedIns and send a few emails out and hopefully get some articles out for you guys as well, sharing all those details, because if there's any way that this community can help, I think that would be fantastic.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. So thank you guys. And look, we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another episode featuring more incredible voices and amazing stories.